What's going on, guys? Welcome to my Friday night subscriber AMA. Sorry if you were one of the people that was clicked on a minute ago. Things were kind of haywire. We just moved back to the retreat property, which we're pretty excited about. The river's right out in the backyard. So tomorrow we're going to go sluicing for gold. And but my setup was a little off because I had to scramble to get it put together. But I had this idea to respond to some of the questions that I've seen floating around in the comments and from my patrons. And yeah, let me know about the audio because I also switched mics and I'm not sure how it's going to go. It's too bad we had to restart the stream because we had quite a decent number of people before. But anyways, we're here, I'm here, and so someone asked me how living in the jungle has changed me, and I thought that was a good question. So I decided to pop on and answer it as like the primary, theme, I guess, to the place to start. And the first thing that comes to mind, I was always kind of a country boy, or at least that's where I was born. So it's not like I was afraid of snakes and spiders and those sort of things. Anyways, I'm not scared of them. In fact, I like them. But I was always terrified of spiders. And we have something here called the Brazilian wandering spider that is really, really prolific. There are tons of them, unless you sort of beat the jungle back. At the property where we are now, the jungle is right around the property, but the grounds are cleared. And of course, it's not quite as aesthetically pleasing to have the almost bare ground. And I originally assumed that they did it for I don't know, I don't know what I was thinking they did it for. But when we moved from this property to a mestizo-owned property where they don't, know how to manage the jungle as well, it was nice because it was a lot cozier, right? The jungle's all up on the buildings and you're really in there. So you have this feeling of being in the jungle all the time. But we would see, today we had a baby Brazilian wandering spider in our stuff when we were moving, and then there was an assassin bug also, which gave me chagas, and honestly I'm probably going to die in the next couple of years because of it. So that's one significant way that the jungle changed me, shortened my lifespan pretty considerably. And so yeah, I mean that's also, we have never seen a Dos Equis on the property here, but at the other property there was two in our living area within a week. One was under the couch right next to my son's toys. He's 4 years old. If a Dos Equis were to bite him, he would not live. There's almost zero chance that he would survive that. There's also almost zero chance that he would survive a Brazilian wandering spider bite. For a grown person, a Dos Equis you're not likely to survive. It's one of the deadliest snakes in the world, and it's kind of disputed whether the taipon or the fertilance. The fertilance is the Dos Equis. It is responsible for 90-something% of all of the snake bite deaths in South America. So, yeah, that's pretty intense stuff. But what I was going to say is, aside from the fact of the Brazilian wandering spiders, I've always been friendly to snakes. Snakes are a hugely important symbol for me spiritually, I think, and have only become more so as I've gotten older. When I was 6 or 7 years old, the anaconda became my favorite animal, and then of course the anaconda is one of the totem animals of ayahuasca. So, and I also started studying ayahuasca when I was very young. So. The sort of serendipitous or fortuitous portentousness of, or the portent of this attraction to this animal, the significance of that only grew over the years. I'm lucky enough to have seen one in the wild. It wasn't a big one, but I did see an anaconda in the wild, which was quite a moment for me. I waited my entire life to witness that. And thank you to David Pruitt, one of our longtime supporters and subscribers, who just showed up at our house and paid for everything, which we couldn't have ever, since COVID, we cannot afford to spend that kind of money to go deep into the jungle and hire guides and all of that stuff. So he took care of everything, which was amazing because that's a bucket list thing. Maybe you heard about the Chagas, that I contracted Chagas and maybe didn't have so long to be around. And I guess we'll get to that. I mean, most of you guys are probably aware of that story, but I can explain. Basically, there are like parasitical, it's a parasitical infection that you get from kissing bugs. And it basically weakens your heart over a period of 3 to 10 years, and you usually die from it. It doesn't matter if you get treatment or not. You have to, it's kind of like rabies. You have to get the treatment before the damage happens. And I'm not really sure exactly what happened in my case. I got really, really sick. I had a client here, and I managed to carry through all of the ceremonies for him quite well, considering that it was the most agonizing shit I've ever been through in my life. A big swollen hard lip that, like, when it hurt, it didn't hurt all the time, but when it hurt, it like pulsed with agonizing, like being smashed in the face with a mallet over and over again. It was crazy. And so ever since then, I've been having chest pains, which is, it weakens your heart. Kind of ironically, I guess, my men on my mom's side of the family, their life expectancy is typically about 55, and usually from a heart attack. So I was already kind of slated for that, and I'm sure Chagas isn't helping that much. But, in other news, the other ways that living in the jungle for 4 years has changed me, I guess, is that I'm not afraid to handle tarantulas. I never really thought that I would ever pick up a tarantula on purpose, and now I don't really think twice about it. I mean, I got so comfortable handling them, wild ones, that, I throw them at my son sometimes and stuff, big ones, they don't bite. They, well, that sounds a little bit crazier than, I'll toss them on his shorts or something. I mean, I don't really like throw them across the room at him. But yeah, I gotten pretty comfortable handling tarantulas. And, just the general sort of appreciation for simple things in life, I think, has really dramatically increased. And I've learned a lot about myself and about our attachments in our culture and in the society at large that are actually completely ridiculous. And I discovered that I believed I was attached to a lot of things that I actually wasn't attached to. I haven't owned a car in 6 years. I never think about it. Except, sometimes it occurs to us that it would be, maybe we would do a little bit better. We could start a travel channel if we could drive around on our own. The buses are a bit of a hassle sometimes. Taxis can get expensive. So, sometimes I guess we think about having it, but I would have never imagined that I could live at all without a car, I guess. When Enrique and I met when I lived in California, I had about $100,000 worth of cars, basically. I had a BMW X5 and a Yukon Denali, and I loved driving around in those cars. Taking a hit of acid and driving around in the Beamer was amazing. I mean, I know that sounds probably reckless to some of you guys that don't know any better, but 80 micrograms of LSD to an experienced user is going to enhance their driving ability. In fact, X Games athletes are known to routinely take about 100 micrograms before competitions because it increases their reaction time and balance and stamina and just every aspect of their performance. And it's definitely considered cheating. So, don't judge me. I was enhanced, not altered. That's how I would think of that. In fact, there are videos of people that can do things when they've taken LSD that they can't normally do. The one guy is an amazing juggler if he takes LSD, but if he doesn't, he can't. And it totally makes sense. You're using more of your brain. There's electrical activity in parts of the brain we don't normally use. Even like master meditators show no electrical activity in those regions of the brain. By the way, you guys, you're totally welcome to ask me questions. One of the benefits of being here at the retreat is that I have a separate bedroom again. We have like 6 or 7 rooms, so I can stay up late and play music or, stream or whatever without bothering my partner and my son. So, yeah, I have plenty of time. Oh, speaking of the retreat, I wanted to mention that we had 2 people reschedule, and so I have a room suddenly open, and it's already October. But I'm going to do a 2-for-1, so if you can find a friend to share the room with, you guys could get 50% off each, and it would make it the cheapest retreat that you will ever attend, and it's definitely better than a lot of them. According to our guests, I'm basing that on the responses and the reviews that we've gotten. One girl that came here said, the quote, "We blew them out of the water." That's what she wrote on Facebook. Rhythmia and the other super trendy one, she had been to them both because she makes a ton of money doing what a lot of girls do these days to make a ton of money. And yeah, so we're pretty proud of our healing, our transformations that we've seen occur here. We've seen people completely remiss from epilepsy and recover from drug addictions and all sorts of misery of all different kinds. I'm still in touch with a lot of our guests, and some of them are moving on to new careers and totally redefining how they relate to everything in their world and people, and cutting out bad relationships and eating completely differently. I mean, it's amazing to see the complete transformation and revolution that occurs in people when these plant medicines are applied in the proper manner. And that is an old magical formula of the great magi, that any change that is possible can be affected by the proper application of the proper kind and degree of the proper force to the proper object through the proper medium. So if one wishes to make an ounce of gold chloride, one must take, this certain acid and this certain gold base and, heat to a specific temperature, et cetera, and then you will have the gold chloride. That everything in this universe is a matter of really fundamental equations. And if you can figure out the equation and stick to the postulate, then there will be success in every case. That is the theory of magic put forth in Aleister Crowley's Magic in Theory and Practice, and he's not wrong. He's absolutely not wrong. That is the case. So, yeah, I mean, I guess detachment from ownership of things, we don't buy nice things. We don't have anything. I've never been one to watch TV or to follow trends or to care about, fashion or any of that kind of stuff. And Enrica also doesn't really care about any of those things. We're just kind of happy to have what we need, and travel around. And, people ask, isn't it, wouldn't you rather have a stable, predictable life? You have a toddler and all of that. And they're absolutely horrified at that idea. My son likes to travel around and see all the different places in the jungle and explore all the new places. And, we can't imagine being stuck in one place for more than a few months. It doesn't suit us at all. So, I really don't understand the tendency that people have to, want monotony and monotheism and, I don't mind monogamy so much, but the other 2 M's that Terence McKenna described as the enemies of mankind, I definitely agree with that. I don't understand what predictability and monotony and, all of that sort of stuff offers anyone besides a slow, pathetic death. I mean, it's just not my thing. I guess I can understand people wanting comfort and whatnot, but I guess I've never had that either. That could be another reason. I was raised in a neighborhood where there were bullets whizzing around and people occasionally actually getting killed, and, pit bulls with gunpowder in their bellies and outdoor toilet and no running water. And, So I mean, maybe it's also just the fact that I never really had any kind of stability, so I don't know what that is, and I don't like. It's just not my, inclination to do that, to put roots down. I've never had any desire to own a house. I mean, I don't understand what that is. Why would you do that? The bank owns it. If you miss a couple of payments, I think they can just take it away from you, and then you don't get any of your money back or anything. The government has eminent domain, and then once you enter into this agreement, you're just a slave for the next 20, 30, 40 years. If I had enough money to just buy a property outright, then I would consider doing it. But I don't see any reason to. None of these things that normal people do make any sense to me in the slightest. Which takes us to our next subscriber question, which is kind of funny. Maybe I don't see a lot of likes tonight. Am I just rambling? Is this not interesting? Hit the like button, please, you guys. And you can join our Patreon, where we have all sorts of guaranteed to be interesting secret streams on all sorts of amazing subjects like alchemy and Freemasonry. But somebody in the comments said, "You strike me as exceptionally intelligent and also exceptionally stupid. I do not envy you. Can you explain yourself?" I've heard that sort of sentiment before, and I'm kind of aware of it. And the truth of it is, if you just want to look at my tests in the military and in high school and IQ tests that I've taken over the years. One of them was for Scientology, not because I was interested in Scientology, but I was actually just wandering around in Washington, D.C. one day, and I saw this building that said Museum of Robert, or what's that guy's name that started Scientology? Whatever, who cares? The Scientology guy. It was his house, L. Ron Hubbard. And so I went in, and there were these very strange people with very intense but hollow, empty eyes. It was really weird. Like, they would just not blink and like stare intensely at you. And I didn't realize it was like a recruiting center. I'd read Dianetics, and here's the thing, by the way, for those of you that might be interested in Scientology. Of course, it's completely insane. Of course, it's batshit nuts, and all kinds of sexual abuse. And listen to the story I'm about to tell you. I mean, it got weird in that place fast, really fast, and I mean like scary weird and quick. But what they do, basically, because, L. Ron Hubbard knew Aleister Crowley. He was well aware of Freemasonry. And he knew that in Freemasonry and other mystery schools, the structure is that you get more and more powerful information as you climb up in the ranks. So he thought, well, let's reverse that. And so Dianetics works. It's psychoanalysis you can do on yourself. It's really all it is. It's not that difficult, but it is, extremely important. Everyone should know how to do it. That much, most of that book is actually worth reading, and it works. You will become clear, they call it. That's the goal, to become clear. And what they mean is that you have resolved all these dissonance patterns in your consciousness and in your emotions and your psyche, and so you are lucid. That's not a bad thing. Right? But then as you pay and you go deeper and deeper into it, it just gets dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber until by the end of it, you've paid $250,000 or whatever to hear that there were aliens that got dumped into the volcanoes in Hawaii, and the little packets of evil that were in them got blown out of the volcano and then dispersed all over the world, and that's where evil comes from. So, I guess the fact that this guy was a science fiction writer was not lost in them. And I noticed some of you guys has dialed in. I'm responding to a question about how it is that I can be exceptionally smart and apparently exceptionally stupid at the same time. And so I'm trying to examine this objectively and see what that yields. And so, that was my first IQ test. So they brought me back into this back room, and they're like, do you mind, answering a few questions? So I started talking to them, and she was like, well, I would like to give you a test and see what your compatibility is. And they're like, if you meet certain criteria, you see all these boats on the wall, and they have like a picture of all these yachts, or not, pictures of a bunch of yachts. And, they're all multi-million-dollar crazy cruise ships and stuff. And they're kind of implying like, a share of this Scientology fortune could be yours. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take the test because I don't really get it yet. I'm not sure what's going on. And so they give me the IQ test, and then they come back, and the woman is like, yeah, you scored really, 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 really high. So we'd like to offer you this position in the church and blah, 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 blah. And so I was kind of thinking, like, maybe I should do this 6 figures, like this. I just got offered a job by the Church of Scientology, because I think probably what they're looking for is people that are smart enough to manipulate the people under them. You know what I mean? So they want like really highly intelligent people, probably of a certain type of intelligence, and I imagine I fit that mold pretty well. So they were like really rabidly trying to get me involved, and they gave my then wife, an IQ test, and then they're like, no, we don't really need to discuss anything with you any further. And I thought that was kind of messed up. They didn't even like sugarcoat it. They're just like, no, honey, you're not that bright, and we're gonna go ahead and just focus on your husband here. And so what stopped it though is that I walked out into the like the waiting room, I guess, and there was this little kid, and he was talking to the I don't know what they were, like, the managers, I guess, the Scientology managers, and he was kind of acting up, and one of them looked at him and goes, do you want to go to the master's chambers? And the kid just stiffened like a board, shut his mouth, like. And in that moment, I was like, all right, master's chambers, like what in the fucking hell is going on in this place? And just the way that kid reacted, it was really obvious that whatever the master's chambers was not good, So a couple weeks later, I actually got a bill for $250,000 from them, basically saying that it doesn't matter that I owed them $250,000 because I would make so many millions that that money would be totally irrelevant. But it was like charging me in advance for this training program, so then I would become a recruiter for the Church of Scientology. And So yeah, according to the Scientologists, I have a very high IQ. And then in school, I was tested in my first year of high school, I think. Well, no, let's go back even further. I don't really like talking about this, but someone asked, and it's a subscriber, and I agreed to do this, so I'm going to do it. In second grade, the teacher brought in some lady. She was not from the school. She was like some, I don't know what part of some program for gifted students or whatever. And I knew something weird was going on. And so they take me out of the class and they take me to this room, and it's second grade, and they give me a book and they say, read the book and then now explain the book. And then they gave me another book and they said, now read the book and explain the book. And they kept doing that just a little bit. I'd read like a paragraph and they would say, okay, explain it to me. And then after a while, when it got, pretty difficult, probably like the 7th or 8th grade level, I noticed this teacher looking at this other teacher like, I told you so, And so I kept going until I got to Shakespeare. And then I got a little bit shaky on like what it meant. And so the teacher was like, you were reading at an 11th grade level. And I don't know how old you are in second grade, like 6 or 7 or whatever, 8 maybe. So they took me out of normal school and they put me in a gifted and talented program. But there was so much abuse and insanity at home that I was like really a bad influence on the kids around me. Not so much like I was trying to get them to do bad things, but I would just lose it and have, outbursts and like break down and scream and cry for no reason and stuff. And so eventually they just stopped inviting me on their field trips and stuff, I think, is kind of what happened there. But yeah, so I was reading at an 11th grade level in second grade. And then in 9th grade, I guess, in my first year of high school, they took like this, gave us the standardized tests for aptitude, I guess. And I scored in the top 1% in some categories and like way low in like math and some other categories. So what this person said, that I seem to be highly intelligent and also very, very stupid, seems to be true. That there are different types of intelligence, I think, and I certainly don't understand humans very well. People, like, my emotional intelligence probably isn't that high. My grandfather's autistic, so I may be on the spectrum, I guess. I definitely don't. A lot of stuff that's really obvious to people, I don't even see it at all. And then the stuff that no one else sees, I see. So, I think it's just a matter of also being self-educated. I never, ever paid any attention in school. I read books that I brought with me, and I left early. But unlike a lot of other rebellious kids that don't, stay in school, and usually those kids don't want to learn anything, and that wasn't the case with me. But I only wanted to learn about the things that I want to learn about. So, I'm probably extremely lopsided because of that. And again, I also think that there are different types of intelligence, but it can be really frustrating, to sort of be out of balance like that, I guess, because I definitely have sort of a very broad spectrum of awareness, but a lot of times my functionality doesn't quite support my ideas and observations to the extent that they could. And it's one of the reasons that I'm looking to network with people, because the best thing that we can do in a time like this, where there's great transitions occurring and there's a tremendous amount of difficulty in the world, and uncertainty and all that, is come together and share skills and network, so that our uneven aptitude from person to person can consolidate into one thing, and really make some sort of substantive presence of unified intelligence and awareness and consciousness and heart and beauty and power. And we will together have the courage to witness the power, to bathe in the fountain, to witness the beauty, to weep like a widow, to ride the spiral to the end. Maybe we'll go where no one's been. Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. I just have a very highly compartmentalized type of intelligence. And there's certain areas where, I seem to be like one of the top minds in this certain, part of the spectrum. But then I got nothing everywhere else. My partner's like that too, Enrica. She is one of the most brilliant people that I've ever encountered, dealing with this one thing that we are really adept at. But then we got nothing everywhere else. Just very highly specialized, I guess, in that sense. Yeah, and so now, the big test for me is to overcome the negative influences of the outlaw upbringing that I had, which, it wasn't all good, it wasn't all bad, but it certainly didn't give me any kind of, life skills, like basic, stuff that everyone that lives in a society probably should be aware of. I have had a bank account for maybe 6 months in my adult life. I haven't had a utility in my name since I was 17 years old. I don't know if I've ever rented a building in my name. I barely exist in the matrix sense of it. So, and then, all right, so this is going to kind of go all over the place because I'm just answering questions from the subscribers. But people have asked me what I think about 5G. I couldn't really stream very well here in the jungle without 5G. So here's the thing, though, I was thinking about this today with the mainstream narrative, and how people, like, I guess what triggered it is that I saw some idiotic meme that, somebody made ridiculing people that question the mainstream narrative on pretty much anything. And it's really horrifying to be reminded that those people still exist and that they're still full of self-righteous indignation, and they really think they're something special. And it's one of the most obnoxious things in the entire universe, as far as I'm concerned. People like that, and people also that really believe in their political narrative, that also tends to come with this like weird, smug, scoffing, self-righteous indignation that I find really off-putting. Yeah, it's pretty bad. But it just reminded me of the issue of psychedelics, that we have known for 50 years. It's one of my biggest pet peeves that people act like we're just now doing all this research that's showing that, psychedelics are amazing for all these different applications and that they're efficacious for treating all of these different, psychological and emotional problems, and that's complete bullshit. We have known that they were effective for those things for 50 years or more. In fact, Humphrey Osmond, who was one of the early lead researchers that was commissioned by the federal government to do a lot of the research, said that we can treat almost every psychological problem known to man, and oftentimes with a single dose. And I don't know if the guy did this deliberately or not, but that was echoed at Johns Hopkins University pretty recently when one of the researchers said, it is simply unprecedented in the history of psychiatry that a compound can treat so many psychological problems with a single dose. Which is almost identical to what was said 50 years ago. And then, of course, we have the press responding to all this, acting like this is a new discovery, that we just became aware of this. And that's, obviously not true. No one ever told the government that these compounds are dangerous and terrible and we should ban them to protect people. No one ever said that. No one ever said that. The researchers said the opposite, that we will no longer need Seroquel and benzodiazepines and rehabs, and a lot less prison. Timothy Leary very famously took psilocybin into the prisons and gave it to the prisoners, and they had a very low recidivism rate after that. I mean, it's, when they have a history like that of deceiving people deliberately in order to protect the profits of one of the sectors of industry, big pharma in this case, how are people still acting like you have to be an idiot to question them? It's just really remarkable to me that they can have a track record like this, and people still somehow believe that it's like a sign of intelligence to believe what they tell us resolutely and without question. It's horrific, and I'm not going to say I was going to say I hate to put people down or, insult anyone, but I don't care. If you've earned it, then, you've earned it. You reap what you sow. I don't really care about offending people, at all. Not even a tiny remote bit. Because the reality is, if it's not good for you, you won't be offended by anything. You know what I mean? If you don't need it, you're not going to be offended by anything I say. If you're offended by anything I say, it's you. It's not me. It's on you, Yeah, so it's cowardice. I think they're just such cowards that they just want to feel safe, no matter what the cost. And I've said for a long time that a lot of what we blame on I guess people's naivety is something more along the lines of maliciousness. I think people are more aware of their own culpability when it comes to war and a lot of the other social ills. And they really are just kind of ambivalent and apathetic because as it stands, they still have a 2-car garage and they can still go to work and their life by my standards might be unlivable. Like I couldn't, it would be hell for me. I can't imagine just, doing the same exact thing every day, going to work and coming home and, going to be put down by your boss and, all that crap. And, I can't imagine accepting that and actually, being so content with it that I would actually allow, wars and, you know what I mean? Like it's like, how is it worth it to them? Like, what is it that they're so determined to cling to? This empty, vapid, pointless, yuppie existence that to me just has absolutely no point and no value. I mean, I'm not there, so I guess they might have some other way of thinking about it. But, from the outside looking in, it just doesn't make any sense at all. I don't understand what they're even clinging to. But, and then they can make very empty, meaningless gestures of consolidation with the downtrodden and, people that have been nuked. They cry about terrorism after their government dropped nukes, not on women and children. I mean, think about that one. The United States government was attacked at a military installation. Right? The way that I understand war, if you're in the military and your nation goes to war, then there's a very good likelihood that you're going to get a bomb dropped on your head, or you're going to step on a landmine, or maybe you're going to get shot. And it might happen on your, home country. And the fact that, the United States was like, we got attacked at home and they had really just stolen this land from the Hawaiians. It's like, you shut up. But, they attacked a military installation, people that already agreed to die if there was a war, people that knew that that was part of the equation. They signed up for it, right? When I was an outlaw, that's how we thought about it. If you were also an outlaw and you did something wrong, bad things could happen to you. But we didn't mess with civilians, people that weren't involved. You treated them with the same respect and dignity, like a normal person. Like, you're interfacing with a normal person, you are also a normal person. You're dealing with a drug dealer or something, then you're an outlaw. You know what I mean? It's the same thing in the military. It's not that hard to understand. The United States retaliates by dropping nukes on women, children, dogs, babies, puppies, birds, just everything. Just fucking blew up entire cities. What kind of bitch ass shit is that? That's like the most punk ass fucking bullshit I've ever heard in my entire life. And I know this video is getting shadow banned already. I've been trying to watch my language because that could be part of the problem. Why? You guys, I posted another short that got 94% watch time and 50% likes and got 14 views. That's not how the algorithm works, It really is difficult for me to convince myself to keep doing this. So if you appreciate the content, please consider supporting us somehow. There are options in the chat where you can send money through Zelle and PayPal and cryptocurrency and Cash App and all that. And it doesn't happen very often anymore. So definitely feeling like an uphill battle. The Patreon is great. We really build a little community in there. It's also interesting to me and very encouraging and rewarding or something. I don't know really what the proper adjective is. But I've just realized recently there are a lot of people in this community that have been there since the, fourth video or something that still are, present in a high percentage of the streams. I see their comments all the time. Still in touch with people after, I think it's almost 5 years now, which is pretty remarkable that, that I still hold any kind of interest for people that have been listening to me talk for 5 years. I don't have guests. It's all off the top of my head. So, I do go to great lengths not to be too redundant, but, yeah, still it seems like quite a compliment that I could hold someone's interest for that long. But, what were we talking about? The bitch ass terrorists dropping bombs on Japan. I mean, it's just really remarkable, that the U.S. citizens can be as out of touch with reality as they are. That they cry about terrorism, and the greatest terrorist act in the history of the world was, without doubt, perpetrated by the U.S. I mean, You could say there are situations where dictators have killed more people, but certainly a single act of terrorism, an attack on civilians. To me, that's what, terrorism is. It's when you attack civilians. And they responded to an attack on a military installation where there was a handful of deaths, relatively speaking, by kindling the same energy that lights the stars upon our enemies. And, how Promethean is that? I was thinking about that today, too. It's really remarkable the way these old myths, these really archetypal myths, can embody such tremendous transtemporal truths, and how they have established their veracity and created their own light of truth, shining in this darkness and shadows, giving warnings and precognitions, really, because Prometheus brought down fire from heaven and he was burned by it, right? And I'm always, be your own Prometheus. If you guys don't listen to Pucifer, you definitely should. Go listen to Prometheus. Be your own Prometheus. Burn the ties of your overlords. Those are the lyrics. But yeah, I'm always saying that, be like a hollow tube to bring down fire from heaven. That's why you have to get rid of the dissonance patterns of fear and regret and shame, and all of these negative things are dissonance. They're interference patterns. And so, as the Scientologist said, you got to become clear so that you can be receptive to this information, really. That's all it is, just information. There's no reason to invoke woo in this case. We have a brain loaded with magnetite, and we have an electromagnetic field that does not lose information, right? And there's no physicist on Earth or neuroscientist that would dispute any of the things that I just said, right? That's absolute certainty. And then our brains give off waves that can be read by machines. So if you start putting all this together, the idea that we have some sort of transmitter that also functions as an antenna, and how many artists and, prophets and whatnot have talked about how when they really receive this transcendental knowledge and wisdom, it's like it's not coming from them. It's because they have turned off the reducing valve in their nervous system. Sometimes it just happens, I think. Some people don't have it on all the way. Ever, I think. Schizophrenics, I think, maybe have a malfunction in their reduction valve. Psychedelics take it down. I mean, you guys know, right? So something like Prometheus, long story short, is that because, he brought down fire from heaven, burned himself in the earth. And in the case of the nuclear bomb, we have learned to kindle the same energy that lights the stars upon our enemies. It's exactly what happened in the Prometheus myth. Exactly what fucking happened. It's really baffling to me that we don't take heed and we don't take notice of these things, and we haven't learned to inculcate our culture with this wisdom. And the most painful part of that is that I know that that's deliberate. It's engineered that way. The vapidity and emptiness and pointlessness of the modern culture that allows, things like nuclear bombings of, any country of decent people would have dragged the leader out into the streets and handled him. You know what I mean? They would have dispensed of him on the spot as soon as they found out what happened. There are no excuses. People act like there are excuses, but there are no excuses for the inaction that people have engaged in the interest of not even doing shit, really. You know what I mean? That's the craziest part of it. It's not like they're, some people do, for sure, and I applaud those people, for sure. Anyone that has had the courage to escape the matrix, anyone who has the authenticity and the drive and the substance to justify their own sovereignty, over their own experience, over their own behavior. It's people that don't need the rule of law. They don't need threats of punishment to conduct themselves in the right way. I applaud all of those people and the seekers and the adventurers and, the nomads and the rebels. But, mainstream basic bitch America is not, I am not impressed. And I don't see any reason at this point to really try to like sugarcoat my animosity. It's certainly not violent, but it's definitely animosity. Definitely animosity. Because so much human potential is squandered, and in the interest of what? Going to a pointless job and living a pointless life and then going in a pointless hole. I mean, the ends don't justify the means at all. And certainly, people that can't be accountable, that would allow their government to do things like this just so they can continue to be comfortable. It's not like, they're not defending like this amazing, extraordinary experience and clinging to it. That would almost justify it or something. That's not even what's happening. It's just like to create this feeling of safety and comfort while they live a mediocre existence. That they're willing to tolerate moms and dogs getting nukes dropped on them. We have to revolutionize this. There's no plan B at this point. There's no other option. We have to reach for something higher. We have to raise the floor. That's another major puzzle piece that has given me hell for a number of years now. This knowledge and understanding that in a dualistic universe, opposites create each other. And this is, one of the most difficult things for people to wrap their heads around and accept. People hate it when they realize what the implications of it are. Physics proves it. There's absolutely no doubt about it. Physics guarantees it. And a lot of mystics from different traditions have noticed this. The Buddha, advised people that if they want to escape from karma, then they must sit and breathe. Because if you do anything, if you do good, then evil arises from that. If you do evil, then good arises from it. This is why the white hats in the mysteries do not hate the black hats, because they know they play an essential role, and that really, in a way, they're the saviors, because they're the ones that are sacrificing themselves and their eternal existence for to generate the absolute good, that's actually how it works. And that it is the fault of the white hats that the black hats even exist. And then St. John of the Cross realized this, and he wrote in his diary, so does this mean that we should sin, that grace may come? God forbid, So it's not like this is an idea that is just bubbled up in my mind or something. This is something that is ubiquitous throughout all of these traditions, and it's one of those things that the implications of it are so difficult for people that they tend to do that whole head in the sand thing. The reality is, though, that putting your head in the sand doesn't make the monster disappear. It just, then you just got your ass in the wind, and it can happen then. Right? So putting your head in the sand is no kind of evasion. Guess I totally lost my train of thought there, but I'm much more tired than I realized I was when I set on this mission. Let me check and see if there's questions. How hard is it to buy property? Oh, there's Jonathan Chapin. Speaking of people that have been around for a long time, we actually have my biological father's last name was Chapin. It's not hard. It's pretty cheap too. In fact, it's dirt cheap in the middle of the jungle. I mean, and that would be the ideal thing, to buy some deep jungle property and have a retreat center there. Something I'm considering, because I'm definitely gonna come into a little bit of money in the next year, and I don't know. It's a lot to commit to, but don't have to do it year round either. You can get locals to live there and take care of it when you're not there. Super cheap to build. They just use the materials that are around anyways. There's electricity run into even Cuba Lleno and these other deep jungle spots. Yeah, you know, it's hilarious though. I just realized that I started this whole thing out because someone asked me what I thought about 5G, and then it turned into this, crazy rabbit hole rant about the disappointments of modern humanity and duality and good and evil and all this stuff. That's just where my head goes, though. Always, it just always ends up there. But yeah, the 5G thing. This is really the wrong platform to be discussing that on. And I discovered that even if I talk about it on Rumble, Google has informed us that they're watching anything that creators do on other sites. So if I say something they don't like on Rumble, they're still going to delete me on YouTube. So it's crazy. They're basically like, I would still have my platform on Rumble. But, of course, I have a much better reach on YouTube. And also TikTok has shadow banned me as well for the same video I got shadow banned on YouTube for. So they really do have a stranglehold on us at the moment. It's pretty intense, really, because I rely on this to make my living. And it's gotten really difficult because, anymore I get 200 views in a few days or in a week. And it used to be, 1,000, 13,000, whatever, much, much bigger numbers. But I guess I'll talk about this anyways. I think it's possible that there is a, graphene or something? I've seen that this is real. That's my thing with conspiracy theories. Like, people say all kinds of shit, and it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't care how many people are saying it either. The more people are saying something, the more likely it is to be wrong. I think the fact that people, they become disenchanted with the mainstream narrative, and then they buy into these alternative narratives that are even more likely to be laden with propaganda and to be misdirection and wrong, because who is it that you need to misdirect? The mainstream people? No, who cares? That's another thing that's weird about the conspiracy theory. If they're trying to get rid of all of the free-thinking people, then why are they poisoning all of the compliant ones? That doesn't make any sense at all, unless the whole objective is something completely different than what people think it is. And that's what my belief about this is. I've held this belief since before any of this started. We're talking about 20 years ago. And I don't really talk about that publicly, like what I actually think is happening. That would definitely be a terminal mistake, I think, for me to do that. But yeah, so I don't doubt for a second that it could be used because, okay, what I was saying is, if I'm going to investigate a conspiracy theory, I'll look and see if there's solid evidence, not just people saying stuff. That doesn't mean anything. I don't care who it is or what they're saying. It's meaningless, completely meaningless. But I will pay attention and look for things that might be legitimate, and then I'll look for actual solid evidence. And in the case of 5G, there definitely is some. The one thing that I was saying about that is that, the government over the years had told us all kinds of shit that's turned out to be untrue. So, lead is safe, lead paint, over the years, asbestos, whatever. They're always saying things are fine, and they're not. So then, also just the regular cell towers. We're losing bees and birds, and it's messing up the migratory patterns of all kinds of animals and stuff. So, what are the chances that it could possibly be okay? Pretty low, And then if you look up these videos of how 5G can be used to actually affect graphene, I think it's called, it looks like it could be deliberately manipulated through 5G. So I just wanted to make sure I finished that thought because it was, an hour ago or something that I was like, okay, so a subscriber asked about 5G and I went on this huge rant that had nothing to do with it. So yeah, there's that. And by the way, you guys, this is subscriber AMA. So if you guys have any burning questions, this is your opportunity to make me talk about stuff, even if I don't want to. The Dr. Greer disclosures. I think the problem with Dr. Greer is the same as it is with most of the rest of these people. It's something that I battled with a few years ago until I had another breakthrough and I had something to legitimately discuss again, right? Like after a few years of doing these live streams a few times a week, I was suddenly like, what now? How do I just keep talking forever? And not, it gave me a little bit of a crisis, I guess, just thinking like I'm not going to do what David Icke did, and I'm not going to do what Alex Jones did, and I'm not going to do what all of these people do when they run out of stuff to legitimately say. And luckily, I kept having breakthroughs about the nature of light and the nature of consciousness and electromagnetic energy and flow state and all of these things, So I was able to move forward with actually something of substance to communicate to people. But I think that, sensationalism sells, and fear is a major motivator when it comes to separating fools from their money. Cowardice is the number one mechanism that propaganda plays upon. Marketing, it drives a lot of marketing. It's, fear is a huge, huge, huge thing. I think fear and sex probably are the biggest money makers. And the bottom line is that it is fear of the unknown that is the greatest fear of mankind. So death and just various brands of uncertainty are what really scare the shit out of people. And so people like Alex Jones, when he ran out of legitimate stuff to talk about, he just started saying whatever, anything he could. I saw something about this today where somebody was saying something about the Tupac murder, and somebody's like, oh, it's a distraction. It's just a distraction. Those idiots that every single thing, oh, a bird shit, the government's trying to distract us. Like, you're not scary. The government's not scared of you. The government's not scared of an uprising. They don't care about distracting you. You're already brain dead. Like, you know what I mean? You're not going to do shit. So they're not, everything's not a distraction. It's just not that the people aren't that scary anymore, Sure, some things might be distractions, like from the fact that the whole world is about to get turned on its head. There are distractions from that, because that's crazy. When you think about AI and quantum computing and ambidextrous robots and all that stuff, the fact that it's already here and just like waiting in the shadows, it's not 5 years out, it's not 10 years out, it's maybe 1 or 2 or 3. But at any rate, so back to Stephen Greer. I think he legitimately had something to say at one point, and then once he ran out of material, he just started making shit up. He got a bunch of money, and he's really this kind of unattractive, nerdy guy, probably got bullied a lot as a kid, all kinds of self-esteem and insecurity issues, maybe a narcissist, possibly a psychopath. I know of people that have gone in his retreats, and they said that he was just batshit crazy at this point. Like obviously just completely making things up and just, crazy ego nut job wackadoodle. So I don't know exactly what your question about Stephen Greer is, but I think that's my general take on all of those people at this point. Alex Jones was marketing COVID toothpaste a little while back. Some of the things that guy has said obviously have been true, but it's not beyond him to just make shit up so that he has something to talk about. And it doesn't matter how impactful it can be on the lives of people. The Sandy Hook thing, one of the major prerequisites for a conspiracy theory to be real is that there can't be too many conspirators involved. And when you're talking about these school shootings as black flag operations, you have that problem. In just about every case, there are way too many people involved for it to be a hoax. The other thing about hoaxing that stuff is the government does not care about anyone. Like, if you are a person that is willing to kill, you're just a person that's willing to kill for profit, for your overlords, for political means, whatever it is. You don't care if it's American citizens or British citizens or Germans or Australians or whatever. You send your citizens to die. You send them to kill other people. So people have this weird idea that their government is like this like shepherd of the people that's there to protect them and serve them and all of this stuff. But that's not got anything to do with reality. So, they have no problem actually doing it. So I'm not saying that it wasn't them. But I am saying that obviously it was not a hoax, it might have been a black flag operation, but it wasn't a hoax. And yeah, so I don't know. I guess that's enough said about that. Just checking for questions. If you guys have any questions, that's what it's about tonight. I probably will stay up late and continue doing this because I might even check off and then come back on with music at like 11 o'clock or something. Please do support us too, by the way. Join our Patreon or come to the retreat. That's really the best thing you can do. Absolutely determined to fill up November. It's my main goal in life at the moment. Oh, the sound's a little crunchy. Is it still a little crunchy? Sorry about that. Here, I can... No, I'm not going to flip that switch. 0 point energy. I'm not able to dredge up information about that at the moment. I'm not sure if you mean like the 0 point field. Is it the same thing as like the 0 point? Yeah, okay, so that's what I thought. That is a very contested subject, and so that's problematic for me because I'm not an actual physicist. Like, I'm learning to do higher math right now because I've realized that I've gotten to a point in my metaphysical journey that I need more language and I need to be able to test theories and to actually work stuff out. So, I'm kind of trying to disprove a popular myth that that spirituality is anti-science. It's anti-science if you're an idiot because, or you're intellectually lazy. It is anything but that. In fact, when you look back at the magicians of Europe and Greece and all of these different cultures, even like the Aztecs and Mayans and the shamans in the jungle, the most intelligent, advanced people were the wizards. That's why when we still intuitively say this when we see someone that is a genius, we say they're a wizard. Look at the whiz kid. The guy's a wizard. It's like a wizard on acid or whatever. You know what I mean? It's the genie. The spirit is the genius. I mean, it's pop culture and probably a deliberate influence from the overlords that have created this idea that spirituality is for idiots and that spirituality is something that is totally irrational and that you don't use logic and you have to abandon critical thinking and skepticism, and that's not true. In fact, if you do all of that in your spiritual practices, you are just a muddle-headed mystic with wind blowing through your ears. It's not valid. It's not meaningful. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. In fact, I'm of the very staunch opinion that if you're really engaged in a development of a meaningful spiritual practice, you're going to have to educate yourself about the physical world in lockstep with your spiritual advancement. Otherwise, you're not going to get anything out of it. And a lot of the advancements, most of them, back in the day when the magicians still held a court position and they were considered important, a lot of the advances in philosophy and mathematics, look at Pythagoras, it was the magicians that stuff came from. So, science began with alchemy, and the separation of science and magic was really the beginning of the downfall of Western civilization. It should demand of you that you increase your knowledge of the natural world, of the sciences, of physics. And so in the case of 0 point energy, it's not certain whether we're talking about something real or not. So because I can't actually look at the mathematics and say, okay, well, this makes sense, I can't really have much of an opinion about it, except for I guess it does sound like it is certain that something like 0-point energy exists. And then there was the 0-point field, which is supposed to be basically the Akashic record, where all of the information in the universe is kept. And we do believe, and it's provable, so I guess we can say that we know, that no information is lost at the quantum level. So that means that, yes, some version of the 0-point field is correct. So I guess that's where I'm kind of confused. I don't know why it is that people are taking the position that it's pseudoscience if it's just a reference to that space that is not space where all of the information in the universe is retained. And it is a really interesting idea because, it seems to me that consciousness is a field. It's not something that is generated by the brain. One of the craziest elements of our current culture is, the selective perception that people use to avoid certain things that challenge their ontological disposition. And the fact that consciousness absolutely does not require a brain, that we're certain of that, has been ignored. This is not pseudoscience. I'm not making up conspiracy theories. The evidence is absolute. So there are people that have been born with absolutely no brain, and in most cases they'll have like 2% or something, and usually they're very severely mentally disabled. However, that's not always the case. In fact, the two brain most brainless people, right, like 0%. In the case of the one guy, his spinal column ended in a sac of fluid, so there was no brain at all. And he was a doctor. He had a headache, persistent headache, and he went to the hospital and got a brain scan, and there was no brain. And he was a doctor with no brain. No brain, doctor. Okay, so then there was another case where the guy had 2% of his brain, and he was a math genius. There was a guy, I can't recall his name off the top of my head, but this study was done in 1996 or 1997. Or no, actually the guy died in 1997, so it was even earlier than this. Can you believe this shit? We've known this for decades, 30 years at least. I know when he died, I don't know when the experiments were, but they found 220 people that had this condition, and something like 30 of them had very high IQs, and they had no brain. Or very little brain. So why is it that science still acts like consciousness arises from the brain? Obviously it doesn't. And then, we also have highly self-organizing systems. We have cellular behavior that really makes no sense in the absence of neurons. If, behavior, especially learned behavior, can exist in the absence of neurons. And so it was posited that DNA could be the answer, and that, the DNA is doing the thinking. And my experience in the Amazon kind of supports that, because I think that, I've experienced communication with plants, right? Like I needed to use aho sacha, the wild garlic vine, I guess would be a good way to understand it. And I had not used the plant. No one had taught me to use the plant. But when I was picking the leaves one day, I just heard distinctly in my head, break open the stalk and get the pith out. And that's what's best for epilepsy and inflammation. And later I researched it, and that is correct. I've also, once I went hunting for ayahuasca, and as I went into the jungle, I heard a very distinct voice that said, "Don't go that way. You'll spend hours back there looking for ayahuasca. You won't find it. Go 150 feet to the right, and then go up the creek, and it'll be right there." And it was. But I ignored it and spent hours just like the voice said. Didn't find anything. And what I suspect about that, and I also suspect that it's the reason or the method, the mechanism that allowed us to discover ayahuasca, where we're mixing these two very specific plants together out of all these plants in the jungle. is that there's the communication directly between the DNA. So biophotons have been experimentally verified to be able to transfer information from cell to cell, even from species to species, so across species. And so to bring that back to the idea of consciousness and information. There's also, the slime mold that out-engineered human engineers with computers. And Paul Stamets commissioned some experiments with mycelium, where he said that, the mycelium established that it was conscious. I even had an experiment along those lines where I was growing mushrooms and I had eaten a small amount of them. And I picked up a cake, and as soon as I thought about picking a mushroom, I felt this like warmth and a little bit of quivering, and I was like, no, that can't be real. So without saying anything, I handed it to my girlfriend, and her eyes bugged out, and she's like, oh my God, it's warm and quivering. And I was like, so who knows, but that's what it appeared to signal to me. And so, it's a really weird thing that we have this idea that consciousness arises from the brain, but it absolutely does not. We know that with absolute certainty. And then as far as like the DNA doing the thinking and processing, Michael Levin's work has challenged that and suggested that it's actually the field, the electromagnetic field, which is actually where all of the quantum shenanigans are going down. So, long story sort of short, if it's true that time is not linear, and quantum at the quantum level, information isn't lost, and consciousness is a field, and we can deactivate our own filtration system, then we should have a theoretical basis for understanding how things like precognition happen. And I think just having that knowledge of the actual like mechanistic basis for these kind of things makes them easier to access. He who has the how is not in need of a why, I guess. So yeah, that's an interesting idea, that it does seem like we're kind of on the edge of breaking through the veil. And by the way, if you rearrange the letters in the word veil, you get the word evil. So this veil that obscures knowledge, that hides the face of Isis, is in fact evil, in the sense that it restricts our evolution until we have pierced through it and extracted the information that we need to take the next steps. By the way, you guys, hit the like button, please. Don't forget to hit the like button. I feel like I'm getting a little bit delirious, so maybe I should... Hanab Pakal asks how I sustain myself out here. Well, it used to be a lot easier because before COVID, I had several businesses. I had a Shopify store, and then I had also, I would ship plants and rape around the world, and that was all going quite well. And then I started this channel, and it was exploding. So it was, things were going remarkably well because I basically got ripped off by all my partners. I thought I was going to have like $60,000 when I came back to the United States after visiting Ecuador, and I came back to about $1,600, and all of my work for about a decade was gone. And so I just kind of left the country with nothing. And yeah, when I got here, my Shopify store was in the top 25% of traffic for that week. And as soon as that happened, they pulled my license, I guess, or whatever it is, their permission to use their platform. They wouldn't give me an explanation. I assume I probably could have sued them. if I had the wherewithal to realize what they had done. So that went away. But that didn't matter because the YouTube channel started blowing up. Our Patreon got up to like $2,500 a month, almost right away. And then there was ad revenue. And by the way, when they demonetized me, YouTube kept all of it. They didn't ever pay me a penny. And they also tips that people had sent in through the pay, what is it called, like the chat thing where you can just click on it. They kept all that too. I got in touch with people and they said that they were not refunded. So multi-billion-dollar corporation just took our money during COVID while my partner was pregnant. Isn't that great? And they didn't refund the people that had given it to me, which is pretty amazing too. But then because of COVID, they stopped the postal service. They shut down the postal service in Ecuador. So we lost the ability to ship plants. We still haven't gotten that back because the private companies are like $100 a kilo minimum. So it's just not like I can't price things in a way that makes sense for people with $100 minimum on shipping. So that business went away. They yanked my Shopify store, as I said. I got demonetized on YouTube. We still haven't gotten an explanation for that. Lost all my appeals. Lifetime ban from AdSense. So now our Patreon and the retreats that I do are our main sources of income. And then I also do a lot of consultation for people. I do flow state consultation, where basically I figured out that what I had done to make so much progress as a, I guess, metaphysical thinker or, whatever it is, veil piercer, is that I had set up my life around flow state triggers in macro instead of just, something that I experienced kind of fleetingly through, guitar playing or whatever. I had made the triggers continuous aspects of my life. And so what happens when you do that is that your entire existence becomes a transcendental experience. And, it has its pluses and minuses, but that's what happens. And so I teach people how to do that with their lives, which is, if you don't do that, you're probably not going to be happy. I mean, that's what I've discovered is that, the discovery of a purpose and then alignment with that purpose and commitment to that purpose are the, mandatory minimum requirements for leading a meaningful and satisfactory existence. You have to do that. And so I do consultations for that and also for medicinal plants and plant medicine consultations, but also just, if you have an issue of any kind, I know the plants. I've been studying plant medicine since I was in junior high school, and psychedelics and consciousness and all this stuff. So I have a really, really long history with it. And I've had some pretty remarkable success when we're able to cure something that medical science has failed to touch. And I'll give you the best example of that. Probably there was a guy that had epilepsy, and it was so bad that he had 2 seizures when he arrived here in Quito, and he was still on his medication. The side effect of discontinuing that medication is increased seizures. So he should have had seizures every 5 minutes. I did not tell him to discontinue his medication, by the way, and there is testimonial of him on the channel talking about this. And so as soon as he started on my teas here, he didn't have another seizure. And to my knowledge, he still hasn't had a seizure. So, yeah, that's, I guess, the answer to your question is that's what I do. All right, so I have time for maybe one more question if I can find one in the chat or somebody pops in a new one. I see someone asking about the orc theory, but I don't know what that is. Orch-O-R. I'll look it up and see if what I think, I guess. I don't see much that I missed in the chat there. It is a really hot, humid night in the jungle. Somebody asked me about thermodynamics, whether I know about, that very basic understanding. Hey, I appreciate you if you're joining the Patreon. It's super meaningful to us because basically we had ourselves set up, and the government in the United States pulled the rug out from underneath of us. We also finally, I kind of broke down, and I was like, all right, we're $10,000 they owe us from COVID that I didn't take because I didn't want government handouts. I didn't want to make my son. Well, I appreciate you too, Zodiacor. I didn't want to make my son property of the U.S. government, so I didn't get him a Social Security number, and then I was like, okay, well, fine, we'll do it. So we get the 10 grand. We were planning on moving our retreats out to this beautiful beach town with that money. And then they're like, no, your son didn't exist, even though you have a birth certificate, because you didn't have a Social Security number. So we just found out that we're actually not eligible for that. It was like $12,000 or something that we were expecting. So yeah, the government has really just done us dirty since 2020. And, Google and all of these, I created so many different income streams, and they just snipped them all for absolutely no fault of mine. So it's been pretty crazy to get the news. And then lately, of course, the shadow bans on all of my social media accounts has really killed me. I was able to funnel a lot of traffic from TikTok, and I posted a video about how all of the media in the United States is owned by the same people, and that they have the same script. You guys have probably seen it. It starts out with one news anchor talking, and then there are two, and then there are five, and then there are 50, and then there are 100, and they're all saying the same lines at the same time. And you might say, well, wasn't that video viral? Yeah, sure, in 2020. But if you repost it now, watch what happens. Because I did that on YouTube Shorts and TikTok on the same day, and I woke up the next day to double-digit numbers in my Shorts. I have almost 10,000 subscribers. You know what I mean? Like, that doesn't make any sense. It's a short. And then on TikTok, I had 57,000 subs and 23 million views or something, and I went down to double-digit numbers after posting that, and neither has recovered. So, yeah, the censorship is real. It's not a joke, and it actually, it's really hurt us because my reach is so much more limited. Well, I certainly can tell you. Yep, I see Zodiacor. So shout out to Zodiacor for becoming a patron. It would be great to get back up to 50. If we can get one more person in there, we'll have 50 patrons. And if we can get $55 more, then I will have my monthly goal. I'm trying to get back to my all-time high of $2,500 a month, which is quite high. But within 1 year, our Patreon got up that high, and then after I got demonetized and my reach dropped, it shrunk a lot. What math do I recommend for advanced metaphysics? Well, one thing that is really interesting to look at is correlations with geometry. So, for example, I'm working on a video right now on the number 666 and the real significance of it. Like, a lot of people say it's Nero, and that's not untrue. Nero adds up to 666 in Roman numerals, but that's not it. That's definitely not it. And the clue, he who hath wisdom, let him count the number of a man, and it's 666, or however it's phrased, is an obvious reference to gematria. And usually something like gematria I would write off as woo, except that I had an experience maybe 20 years ago that is just so insane that I can't really imagine. Plus, number lies behind everything, right? I mean, it's not like that surprising that there would be some truth to this. But so I had chronic fatigue syndrome for a really, really long time, and I got a hold of some DMT for the first time at a Tool concert, and I took it home and smoked it, and all my symptoms went away. My friend had just discovered a gematria calculator online, and he went in and typed in, I went in actually and typed in N-dimethyltryptamine after the DMT made all my symptoms go away. And the only phrase in the entire database that had the same value as N-dimethyltryptamine was cure for chronic fatigue syndrome. So, I would like to see the probability of that calculated, that's a coincidence. I mean, it was just so, that's interesting. But there's something with like the cosine and sine of 666 degrees that will be in this video, and basically what it shows you is that the reverse of 666 is the golden mean. And that's really, really interesting in light of this idea that there's a veil between worlds that reverses things, right? And that everything contains its contradiction. It's also a confirmation of this idea that everything contains its contradiction. And then also, if we look at the numbers 3, 6, and 9 that Tesla was so, enamored with, and you think, okay, well, 6, 6, 6, equilateral triangle, 60, 60, 60. What's in the center of the equilateral triangle? The consciousness of the creator, right? The eye in the triangle. Well, what shape is your pineal gland and your two eyes? It's an equilateral triangle. And what is, the sum total of these three points working in conjunction, right? And there's all this stuff that comes out of it. So my point really is that there's functional numerology, and there are also correlations that you can see between, it's not just about the number. That is superstitious numerology. You want to make correlations with function, things that these numbers actually do. In the Book of the Law by Aleister Crowley, he talks about how the numbers are living entities, that they do stuff. They're functioning entities, and they also all contain infinity, which is a crazy thing. Like, you can divide a number forever, right? And there are other ways to pull infinity out of zero, and it's in everything. The all is in the all, right? So, yeah, but the functionality of numbers is really the thing to look at first, and like the number 9 is really, really insane. This video that I'm making, I'll show a bunch of examples of the different weird things that 9 does. But 9 is used in gematria, for example, as the number of truth, because if you multiply 9 by anything and then reduce all the numbers, it becomes 9 again. So the truth is always the truth. The truth is self-substantiating, and the truth never changes. The truth is eternal. So 9 is always 9, no matter what you do to it. And so those kind of things. And there's also a relationship between 6 and 9 and the way they invert. There's a clue to that that's given in the fact that 6 is the number of the sun and 9 is the number of the moon. And when you reflect something, it's reversed. And when you, the moon is illuminated by the sun and the number is inverted, right? So you're looking for stuff like that, the actual function of numbers. And one really interesting project that you can work on is to look at the symbol of the Philosopher's Stone. You have the circle on the outside, and 3 plus 6 plus 0 is 9. And then you have the equilateral triangle in the inside. So 60 plus 60 plus 60, or 60 times 6 times 6 times, however you do it, it reduces to 9. 6 and 6 and 6 is 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. And then, of course, the angles in the square also, and there's a lot of interesting stuff that can be gleaned from contemplation of the numbers that are involved with that symbol and their relationship to each other. But I have to leave some task for you to do yourself, because really the real benefit of that kind of spiritual work and intellectual exercise combined with the sort of more esoteric work is that you aren't just doing intellectual exercises. These things, the symbols and the processes of coming to understand the symbols catalyze internal processes that cause changes and development. In fact, in the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and Freemasonry and the OTO, ritual work with symbolism is able to catalyze very highly specific experiences that are oftentimes in no way overtly connected to the symbols that are catalyzing these visions and stuff. So it's really, really interesting to experience what happens when the mind engages with these symbols. I also had this kind of explained to me in a different way by ayahuasca once upon a time. I was having all these visions of this absolute gibberish, and I was complaining about it. I think in this particular case there was like this trolley car sort of looking thing, as if it was as if it was drawn by like a Japanese artist or something, and like ultra modern Japanese art. And I was like, what is this crap? I'm just like laying here in the jungle staring at this stupid modern art thing. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing? And, I was kind of annoyed. And because also a lot of the other visions lately had been just gibberish. And, I'm like, what is the point of all this gibberish? And the ayahuasca's response was that, sometimes, or, the mind works in symbols. And just because you don't consciously understand what you're looking at doesn't mean that nothing's being communicated to your subconscious. And I guess I'm saying that I experienced that on an even more profound level working with symbolism. And one of the ways that you can understand why that is that if you think about your ability to compress information into a symbol, then you can create a language that has much more dense with information than contemporary symbols that we use for language. So, for example, if you're doing the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, you have the 5 points of the pentagram that symbolize, spirit, earth, air, water. And then you have the directions that also symbolize elements, but the 4 directions also symbolize the 4 forces of physics, the 4 archangels, and also, water is emotion, and earth is like fertility and, money and all that kind of stuff. And air is the intellect. And so you have these associations. And then you have archangel associations, and those archangels are associated with different things like healing or protection or whatever it is. And so, in these directions with these pentagrams and these elements and these forces and these angels and all this stuff, you have compressed a bunch of symbols into one thing. And it allows you to process more information more rapidly to do that. And then you learn after a while that engaging with sets of these symbols can, really catalyze very powerful internal processes. That's really the point of ritual work. If you look at the writings of someone like Aleister Crowley, towards the end of his life, he said the Goetia are actually just parts of the human mind. And I think that disappoints a lot of people to find out that, me, for example, or Aleister Crowley, or, a lot of these other people that I think are the best minds that have been involved with this stuff, don't really believe in spirits, at least not that they have their own objective existence. There's no reason to. I've been an ayahuasca facilitator for 6 years, and I've worked with it for longer than that. And, I've been in 2 legitimate lineages of the mysteries, and I've studied ritual magic forever. And, I have experienced something like preter-human intelligence, I guess, an extension of the human mind. But I've done a lot of tests to see if it has its own objective awareness, and the answer seems to be no. And, also there's other bits of evidence that refute, like the idea that the ayahuasca spirit exists objectively, because different tribes perceive it as different things. So what's up with that? If it's a thing that actually exists, it just exists on its own terms. If something is dependent upon the perception of a person, then it's not real, So, I think it's also important to consider that what does real mean exactly? And so when I say that it's not real, I don't mean exactly that it doesn't exist, because when I talk about interfacing with ayahuasca, I definitely refer to it as she, and I experience it as a dialogue, and you know what I mean? Because that's how the experience goes, but I'm not really 100% committed to the idea that there are actual spirits that are something other than just compartmentalizations of the human consciousness that we can interact with, and they present sometimes as very real. I mean, I've seen some wild stuff. One time there was a group of spirit beings dancing around me when I had drank a very strong dose of ayahuasca after fasting for a couple of days in Shuar territory in Gualaquiza. And at one point my partner was laying beside me, and one of the spirit beings was female, and it like leaned. I saw my partner sit up, and the spirit being came over and like leaned in to hug her, and I saw her put her arms out to embrace it back, and at the last minute spirit was like, you know, like, don't touch me, you grimy mortal, or whatever, you know, like psyched her out. And then she fell back looking very dejected. So obviously that happened, and we both perceived it. But I'm still more inclined to think that it's some kind of projection of a collective mind, rather than like these interdimensional beings that always exist. I mean, maybe, you know, but overall it doesn't really seem that way to me. There's a lot of interesting questions about that, you know, like what are they doing when we're not looking? I've also noticed that these ayahuasca and DMT entities, oftentimes whatever they're doing makes absolutely no sense, you know, and this is a really common experience. People see these things and they're just doing some whacked out thing that, you know, it's like taking an object in and out of a box or something, and you know, they act like it's like the most profound thing in the universe, and it's just like a cat with one eye or whatever. And, you know, I mean, it's just, it's really strange. I guess, you know, the bottom line is that it is a good source of information, and it really helps us. So whether these things are objectively real or not is kind of neither here nor there. And I think this discussion started out about symbolism. It had nothing to do with spirit beings. Michelle, I don't know that I really am allowed to do that. I am definitely shadow banned. There's absolutely no question about it. And it is really frustrating. My analytics, you know, have been getting a lot better. So longer watch time, like 40, 50% likes to views, which is crazy high. You never see that anywhere on YouTube. Very rarely. And the videos still just die after a couple hundred views. So they're definitely, it's weird. Like, they haven't deleted me. But I did just call their attention to it because someone told me that sometimes if you're shadow banned, you can tell them and then they'll take it off. Which would be amazing. You know, it'd be great to have actual reach. But it's also possible that since I've directed their attention to my channel, that they'll delete it. So we'll see what happens. If that happens, follow me on Rumble, I guess. It's sad, though, that I've had to go to Rumble because I really don't like the company I have there. You know, I'm almost embarrassed to say, like, hey, follow me on Rumble, because there's just so much just, you know, I'm not, you know, political. I'm not left. I'm not right. But I definitely don't really like hardcore right-wingers in general, and I don't really like that association, but I also believe in free speech, and, you know, information is power, and if you look throughout history, one of the main objectives of the overlords has been to control information. They, you know, distributed the Bible in Latin in Europe so no one could actually read it, while they changed it and reprinted it. And redistributed the King James Version. You know, when they got to South America, they burned all the Mayans' scrolls and books, thousands and thousands and thousands of books. They had a written language. They burned it all. You know, they burned the Roman library in Alexandria. And still to this day, one of their main objectives is to manufacture, distort, and control the free distribution of information. You know, that was the great promise of the internet, that we would all be empowered, and that anyone would be able to get an Ivy League education regardless of their, you know, family's status and all that kind of thing. And here's the thing about that. AI is about to hit an IQ of like 300 in the next couple of months, like the Chat GPT. And then after that, we'll start seeing like 1,000, 3,000, 5,000, and it's going to have access to all the information in the world and probably even top secret data. So I think the reason that we're actually under so much scrutiny and so much oppression and so much of an effort to confuse and distract and misinform and disinform is that this great equalizer is coming. And it'll pull the masks off the elite. The political systems will be completely exposed if AI is truly objective. It will unmask them, and it will allow anyone to manifest their ideas. It will, it's really just, the impact of it is almost unimaginable. But the main thing is that it's the great equalizer. And so, I think that's the reason why we're seeing so much panic from the elites, because they don't know what to do. They can control it for a short period of time, but not for long. So it's either going to be that everyone has the same income and people I think hate to hear this, but our old system is gone. It's not coming back. They're not resurrecting it. It's not happening. Forget about it. 100% it's not happening. It is possible. It's not outside of the realm of possibility that we will have a better system. That wouldn't be hard even. But, it's really difficult to tell because the size and nature and magnitude of the changes that are coming really make it difficult to predict anything, I think. Yeah, actually, speaking of, using a perception to influence outcome, I just ran into an article by Rick Scully, who was a LSD manufacturer, and he worked with the Grateful Dead and learned from their soundman Bear, who made all of the, great pure LSD in the 70s. And, a lot of the old boomer types, they will talk about how the acid is not the same anymore and whatever, and it's really just street level knowledge. They're just kind of ignorant, of the subject at least, and don't understand what they're talking about. And there's so much myth and superstition around, ayahuasca and LSD and all of any kind of psychedelic. So they think it's something else now or whatever, but it's, lysergic acid diethylamide 25 tartrate is, that's what it is. It's that molecule. That's what it is. And people say, well, there's adulterants in it, and that's kind of dumb too, because you're taking such a small quantity, 100 micrograms or whatever, that even if there are adulterants, even if half of it was adulterants, they wouldn't be strong enough to affect anything. But he was talking about how it's setting an expectation that actually caused them to have that experience. Also, the fact they're not 16 anymore. And I think they really undervalue that. Their brain is old and crusty and dusty inside, and it's just not it's just not the same. They're not the same person. But he was saying that they actually did an experiment where they made a bunch of different pellets, and some were red, some were blue, some were yellow, but that was the only difference. That's it. Purple, all these different color barrels of acid. And they gave them out to people, and they asked for, feedback. And people said the yellow one was speedy, and they thought that, and people would have consistent answers, so the color actually influenced their perception of the experience, apparently. Because the people that ate the yellow one would consistently say it was speedy, maybe it had meth in it or something, even though if you actually logically think about that, there's not, even if it had a couple micrograms of meth in it, you wouldn't notice. It wouldn't affect you. And the red one is, makes you tired and groggy, and maybe it was, something else. And but they were actually all 100% identical. But people reported, consistent experiences based on even the color. And he also said that he thought supply chain was really important, that who manufactured it and who had handled it before it was consumed all contribute to it. But yeah, certainly what you're saying there about, the expectation affecting perception. Do I have a morning routine as a magician? Not as much as I used to. This is something I'm trying to get back in touch with because I think that the practice that is assigned to a neophyte in pretty much any one of the major lineages of the mysteries that have managed to trickle down to us, the OTO and the Hermetic Order, the Golden Dawn, and those type of organizations, twice a day, the invoking and banishing version of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram is a brilliant thing to do. And even if you don't believe in magic, and you really shouldn't exactly, I don't in a way, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. But from my point of view, there's no supplication of demons or angels or gods or whatever. It's not about that at all. It's about, electromagnetism and symmetry and symbols and consciousness, more than anything. Those other things may or may not be real, and they may or may not come into the equation, but it's not relevant. What's relevant is that if you do certain things, certain results will follow. And so the real benefit of the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram can be understood just in terms of deliberate self-engineering of your consciousness and your awareness. So, you wake up every day and you clear the mind with the fourfold breath pranayama, which is a stable shape. It's a cube. There's all kinds of reasons why it's, important that it's the fourfold breath and not other. And, the idea of the cross actually is that the cube exploded and became the cross. And this is where the universe came from. We're going through the Rosy Cross and all this stuff in the Patreon. If you're not a member of the Patreon, join at the $10 higher tier and you can access the secret streams where I go into all this stuff in a tremendous amount of depth. But so the cross explodes and you form the Kabbalistic cross. And then you go through this process of merging with the Godhead. So you're expanding and rising through the planes until you've expanded to the maximum possible size, which is the Adam Kadmon, the universal man, and you merge with the Godhead. And then so, just doing that on a daily basis is a good reminder of your divine nature and your sovereignty over the circle that you have cast around you before you started doing any of this other stuff. And then you're invoking all of the forces that you want to influence your experience and to define your universe. In each of the directions, all of the things that are correlated with the north, the south, and the west, and the east, and the different elements and the different aspects of your psyche, the emotions, and all of that stuff. And so you're kind of designing your universe every day in the morning, and then at night you reverse the pentagram. So in the morning it's going down because you're drawing the light down into the matter, and then redintegrating those forces back into the substructure of the universe in the evening to clear the air. So you're sending the things that you have accumulated throughout the day back into the universe that do not serve you. And then the middle pillar as an adjunct to these ceremonies is really good because you are going through a process of creating spheres that are similar to the chakras. And so you have the sphere of Keter above your head, which is the divine light that you're drawing down into the pineal gland, and you are vibrating certain words and to the throat. And the idea is that you are, you're drawing this divine light down and you are integrating the influence of your highest self with your speech and your breath. So, and also the breath is symbolic of the life force. And so integrating that, obviously you should do that. And then drawing it down into the heart chakra or Tiferet on the tree of life so that your emotions are regulated by this divine influence, and then down into the groin so that your creativity and sexual impulses are also integrated with divine light, and then down to the feet or Malkut, the foundation, so that your steps are integrated with this divine light and you are guided in all of your functionalities by this light of Keter. So, that ritual practice, I really don't see any reason for anything else. You can do other stuff, but I don't, at the end of the day, after all these years, I could pretty much throw all the rest of it away and only keep the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram and the middle pillar. It's all I really teach at my retreats as well. There's not a lot of reason for the other Well, there are specific reasons to do, the hexagram and star sapphire and star ruby and all of this other stuff. But yeah, that's what I would recommend more than anything. He's asking, what is my favorite interpretation of Gnosticism? And I would have to say none, really. I'm not really, I don't want to say I'm not interested in it. I certainly have read the Nag Hammadi library, and I am struck by the fact that the Bible sounds like, the Old Testament sounds like a tribal society encountering an alien. More than it sounds like, especially if you read it in Hebrew, which is a requirement of, certain lineages that I took initiation in, at least basic Hebrew. So, for example, the Elohim is both masculine and feminine, and it's a plural, and it comes down from the sky. It's not he, and it's not him, and it's not Jehovah. So, and then also it flies around in a metal tent, and it knows about diseases and stuff. It tells them not to sleep with lepers, whatever. Flames come out of the back, so you follow the flames during the day, or the smoke during the day and the flames at night, and it floats around and blows up enemy tribal members, and it all just sounds like, it's a metal tent, they describe it as, and it just sounds like they ran into an alien. But most of it does not really strike me as, William Blake or Aleister Crowley or, any kind of like real legitimate mystical experience. It's just like this drivel. And the Nag Hammadi library really strikes me as legitimately coming from that place of transcendental mind. But, what happens is, I think, especially in the early stages of the reception of this transmission, is that people's ego stuff and their own personality kind of taints the transmission, and so you end up with dogma, and you end up with weird ideas about archons and all of this kind of stuff, archons, however you want to say it, and I don't really buy into any of that. So what I like about the idea of Gnosticism or Gnosis, Gnosis just really means knowledge, and Crowley called his church the Ecclesiasta Gnostica Catholica, which is the universal church of knowledge, basically, because Catholic actually just means universal. So what I take away from it mostly is just the idea that we have our own responsibility to that there's no intermediary, that there's no book, there's no prophet, there's no leader, that you are sovereign, you're God of your world. It is your responsibility to actually legitimately catalyze internal processes that revolutionize the being and connect one to the universal mind or the divine light, or however you want to think about it. That is the goal, and that is the important influence of Gnosticism for me. It's not about like you can't really find a list of conduct, moral code, and just follow it because you want to be a Christian or a Muslim or a Jew or whatever it is. That's only going to make miserable, misguided people. You can see that. Just look around in the world. You are what you do. And those religions have all failed when asked to see the securities. None of them have failed to promise too much, but they all have failed when asked to see the securities. And so, that's the real truth of it, that you can't just commit to some dogma. You have to actually experience internal processes that cause changes that make the behaviors that are divine and holy and righteous natural to you. You know what I mean? You can't just do it out of a sense of obligation to some abstract piece of paper. It has to be an organic evolutionary process. And that's where I think religion generally falls on its own face. But But the general idea that we can remove the intermediary and become our own shaman, become our own magician, become our own priest, become our own god. Another aspect of this that may come from Orphic Gnosticism is the idea that it's actually present in a bunch of different traditions, but this idea that this nothingness became aware and that caused it to explode, basically. Oversimplification, but that's the general idea. So you can think of it as like a plate that's dropped on the ground and bursts into a million pieces, but no part of that plate is higher. They're all just pieces of plate. So the same is true of the deity or creator that exploded and became this reality. There's no hierarchy. There's no one in charge. There's nothing higher than you. And if you really think about it, this idea of hierarchy in religion has compelled people to follow voices in their head that are just their crazy-ass own voices to do horrible things. There's a voice in my God, and I've been brainwashed my whole life to believe that I have to absolutely do what God says, so I need to go murder a bunch of people or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that kind of stuff comes from this hierarchical belief system. And, it also makes people predisposed to rule by governments. And the fact that they are trying to conform to a set of rules rather than actually undergoing processes that engender those qualities in them, they always fail, and so you need law to constrain them. I'm always saying that I think religion is far worse than people realize in terms of the level of toxicity and the damage that it's done in terms of creating a overly docile, also the savior complex that people have. This is one of the reasons. There are two reasons. One is that we are primates. Like it or not, you're an ape. And we have this instinct to follow an alpha male. And so that's part of the reason that we follow presidents like this. But when you look at the kind of power and influence and the weird sort of worship that people have on their leaders, a lot of it comes from the precedent that's set in their mind and their being by the religious influence. So, to realize that you are co-equal to the Most High God, your will is sovereign, and there's nothing that will stand in your way. There's nothing to refute that. The magician has the inertia of the universe to assist him. There's nothing but light and vacuum. That's it. There's nothing else in the universe. And so, based on that information, we have to liberate ourselves from the constraints and the doctrinal and dogmatic influences of these historical paradigms and step into our empowered, fully realized selves constrained to the purpose of our higher self. That's it, So I guess my favorite version of Gnosticism is my own version of Gnosticism. And that's how I think it should be. Johnny says that he his roommate did acid last night, and now he's going on about Jews. And that subject is obviously very touchy. There's a lot of anti-Semitism everywhere. And I what bothers me about it is that, people just have a hard time being honest and realistic about stuff. To say that any group of people is like abjectly evil is just dumb and awful. Obviously there are all sorts of normal Jewish people in the world that are totally fine and wonderful even. But, when people say that they own the banks in Hollywood and stuff, they're not wrong. But it's not like bad just because they're Jewish or something. It's just, I don't know. Like, I just feel like people get that mixed up, just because there are contingents within certain groups that are doing bad stuff doesn't make them all, complicit. It's just not how it works, and we have to have the presence of mind to not be that simple and make those kind of unfair associations and Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of just hard facts, numbers about African Americans in the United States that if you repeat them to people, they'll say that you're racist, and you're just literally reading off of the FBI's, statistics. But that doesn't condemn the race. It's a subset within a race. So, it's interesting because I feel like we have to be able to have an open dialogue about those things in order to fix them. As long as we have to pretend they're not true in order to, to appease people in our society or something, it's just going to, it props up the hatred and division, So it's just really backwards. We have to be able to have honest and open dialogue because when we have to pretend that things are a way that they actually aren't, we're actually hurting the people that need help. That's the real truth. Well, thank you guys so much. It's always nice to hear, support. And despite Shadowban, the numbers are getting a little bit better over time. There's live streams are growing little by little by little. They're still not as big as they used to be. We had 14,000 people at one point in 2019 when I first started. So, we really thought we had gotten somewhere. And then, right after that happened, and it might have been why, because it was around the election time, and suddenly I saw the numbers exploding, and I was like, what the fuck is happening? And I realized, okay, I have, 14,000 people like Madison Square Garden here. They're listening to whatever I'm saying. So I started telling them, why are you guys pretending like these candidates aren't all under the control of the same people? And, why are you pretending like this election is real? Why are you pretending like democracy makes sense in a nation full of, undereducated, over-medicated, belligerent, egomaniacs, delusional, Jerry Springer watching, you know what I mean? Why are you acting like those people should be allowed to choose world leaders? You know what I mean? I was just going off like that. And it was shortly after that I was demonetized. So I wouldn't be surprised if I was just spitting too much truth to just way too many people. And they were like, oh, hold on, buddy. Not having that shit. I haven't seen Citizen Cop auditing filings, but I'm glad that there are people out there watching the police and trying to hold them accountable. I'm really glad for body cameras. I'm really sad that I didn't have more presence of mind when I was younger, and I let cops bust me a couple of times where I very easily didn't have to. So it's good to see people getting educated about how to deal with police. It's really unfortunate that police in the United States, it's really unfortunate that police in the United States are trained to try to find a way to arrest people. They're not really, they should have the attitude that if they have to arrest you, then they will. But they shouldn't be trying to figure out if they can. That's not what their job should be. But that's how they're trained. And also we have prosecutors like Kamala Harris is a horrifically good example of this. She's actually been called words like evil and oh man, what is the other word? There's some really harsh language that judges have used against this woman, who's now somehow vice president. But yeah, the prosecutors are trained to try to prosecute people whether they're innocent. They don't care. Can we convict you? Not should we convict you? And that has driven a lot of the problems in the United States. For-profit prisons are the evilest thing I can imagine. And in case anyone doesn't know the history of Kamala Harris, you definitely all should. I mean, she was trying to have a person she knew to be innocent executed regardless of his innocence. And she knew he was innocent, and she tried to kill him for 18 years. And his lawyers said that when he got out of jail, they saw him picking up his cigarette butts and putting them in a plastic bag so he could take them home and burn them because he didn't want to be framed again. So he was severely traumatized. And she kept people beyond their release date illegally if they were working for the state, so basically slaves. she would keep them as slaves. She's supposed to be a black woman, right? Her family was the largest slave owners in Jamaica. Yeah, I definitely have seen a few of those filmings. I'm trying to think. I feel like, well, I'll just save it for the video. I was going to explain a little bit more about the equilateral triangle and the way that the sine and cosine of the angles is representative of the antinomies, the opposite forces that are evenly compelled so that they interact in exact and perfect balance at the third point of the triangle. But it's better that I save all that. If anybody wants to collaborate that's good with AI too, man, I really need some visuals that are way beyond my ability to create. It's really problematic for me that I just don't have the resources right now to do this stuff. And I wish I did. So do you guys have any more questions? Because otherwise I'm going to chunk off of here. And I've been drinking this tea that's got coca leaves, psilocybin mushrooms, Toei, the Brumansia, Guayusa, Uña de Gato, and Chuchawasi. Stones versus Beatles, definitely Stones. With a few notable exceptions. I don't know. I mean, there's a couple of Beatles songs that are probably better than any Stones song. But in general, I would have to say the Stones. Sympathy for the Devil, the lyrics are so brilliant to that. Also, the Beatles were kind of a fraud. They were really propped up by George Martin and their producers. People kind of think that they wrote all those flute parts and strings and composed all these piano parts and stuff. None of that is real. They brought in very simple sketches of their songs, and then George Martin would show them how to make more sophisticated chord voicings and stuff. And so they get a lot of credit for stuff they didn't actually do. The Beatles were actually the Fab Four or something. I don't know how you say it. But yeah, it was a bit of a trick. They're kind of studio gangsters. It wasn't as real. The Rolling Stones were more real. The problem with the Rolling Stones, though, is that they were psychopaths. Particularly Jagger. He was, billionaire king, basically. Maybe not quite a billionaire, but the audience pissed him off once, and he had bikers attack his own audience with clubs, and the sun was going down in Altamont, and people were getting killed, and they wanted him to go out stage to stop the violence, and he said he's not going out on stage until the sun was at a certain level because he didn't want his makeup to look wrong, and he didn't care how many people died. He's not going to go out on stage until the lighting is exactly the way he wants it to be, so he looks exactly the way he's supposed to. So, all these people were just kind of whacked out, I guess. But yeah, I don't know. The Beatles are kind of nerdy. I mean, there's a reason I think the only American band that people still really care about seems to be the Grateful Dead, and that makes absolute sense to me. Those are both British bands, though, so I guess Led Zeppelin was probably a little bit better than either one of them, but just not consistently. They had two songs that I think were just absolutely phenomenal. The Battle of Evermore. Since I've Been Loving You has a really great riff. That's some good ones. I would probably prefer Sabbath to all of those bands, though. Honestly, I don't like the Queens of Stone Age or Mastodon very much at all. but it wasn't David Grohl in Queens of the Stone Age. When I was like 8 years old, I'm from Fairfax County originally, and when I was in high school, his mom was my English teacher for a very brief time because they exploded right during that year. I guess it was the year before, but it got to the point where she couldn't teach anymore, and she had to withdraw from her job. So one day she wasn't there anymore. And it's true, people just wouldn't shut up about it. Like, she couldn't teach. Everybody's just, have you ever seen Kurt Cobain in his underwear and shit? But Grohl was in a band called Scream before he was in Nirvana, and my dad lived with the guitarist whose name was Harley Davidson somehow. And so they were like this punk rock band, and I was probably like 9 or 10 years old, and there was this scrawny kid that was always passed out on the couch downstairs, and he had a squirrel named Sid Vicious. It was a drug house, and the squirrel eventually like somehow chewed its way into a big bag of cocaine and died. But the squirrel named Sid Vicious and all kinds of punk rock legends used to come over, like guys from the Misfits and... you know that song, I got something to say, I killed your baby today, doesn't matter much to me. Green Last Caress, Metallica covered it. I can't remember what they're called, Diamond Head, I think. Yeah, Diamond Head came over a couple times, for nefarious reasons, of course. And so the kid on the couch one day had broken the cymbal of this other drummer that left his drum kit over there, and he didn't have any money to pay for it. So the other drummer said, if you touch my drum kit again and break anything, I'm going to beat you up. And he did it. And so I was down there playing Nintendo, and the other drummer, whose name was also David, came downstairs and grabbed him and dragged him out into the front yard. I went running up, and he just beat him senseless, like really badly. He's a biker, this guy. And so years later, after Cobain had died, my father and I were watching Unplugged, Nirvana Unplugged, and my dad like spit his beer out, and he's like, "Is that drummer's name David?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Dave Grohl?" I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Don't you remember that kid that nicely beat the snot out of in the front yard for breaking his cymbal?" And then it hit me that kid that was always passed out on the couch when I would go visit my dad was Dave Grohl, and the one that got beat up in the front yard. So, yeah, he lived in my dad. It wasn't really my dad's basement. I mean, it was like a house. They were all these, biker, drug dealer, band, musician, kind of punk rock people. We're all just kind of living there. Including Dave Grohl. So yeah, that was weird. I didn't know, until after Kurt Cobain was dead, that kid was that guy. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I never talked to him or anything. He was just like the dude on the couch. The dude on the couch when I was growing up was Dave Grohl. It's like an archetype, He was that guy for a few years, I guess. I don't know. I don't see any more questions. It's getting late. It's almost midnight here. Here in the Amazon rainforest, where the spider bites will kill you, and no, it is amazing here, man. It's amazing to walk out into the backyard every day and see this primordial, it just looks like you can imagine like a brontosaurus just sticking its head up at any moment. And there's psychoactive stuff all over the place. I mean, you guys have seen probably the mushroom videos that I've posted recently. There's mushrooms everywhere, ayahuasca growing all over the place. DMT containing plants line the roads. Mimosa pudica is just all over the side of the road. There's a close relative of Mimosa hostilis. I can't remember how to pronounce it at the moment, but it's everywhere all over the side of the road. It's just laced with DMT, the whole area. Bobansana contains harmalas. It's all around everywhere. Medicine everywhere, all this exotic food, all the fruits and stuff. My partner wants to go and visit her parents in Vilcabamba in the Andes, and nah, how about if you go and I'll stay in the jungle? That's one of the things, I started this out by talking about how being in the jungle for 4 years has affected me. May have actually only been 3 years now that I'm thinking about it, but cheers, man. Thanks, Alpha Draconian. What was I saying though? Oh yeah, the other way that it's affected me is that I don't like the idea of leaving. When I go to the city, I feel really exposed and uncomfortable, and I don't like what the lights do to my head, like inside of the buildings and stuff. Yeah, it's the longer I'm in the jungle. Good night, man. And the longer I'm in the jungle, the harder it is to imagine trying to assimilate back into. I mean, I can't even say that. I was never part of normal society. I really wasn't. And never in my life. I mean, I had a normal day job for like a year or something in my entire 44 years on Earth. So I can't say, I guess, that, you know, and that doesn't help. That, you know, trying to imagine, like, if I had to, like, try to go, like, the interviewer would be like, can you explain why this gap in your employment starts at birth? I'm sure there are DMT grasses here. Yeah, I mean, I'm not really sure. The Amazon fires didn't affect me really because I'm not in Brazil. That was mostly, I think, all in Brazil, and I'm in Ecuador. So, but what does affect me is the pesticides. Vegans are killing the jungle, and meat eaters. Honestly, I mean, it's people in general, but. The number of insects has drastically decreased in the years that I've been here. I think it's actually 3 years. I should change that in the title. I think it's only been 3 years. But yeah, you know, even the upside is I don't get bitten as much. There are less sandflies and stuff, but yeah, there's less butterflies, caterpillars. You know, they've all disappeared. There's hardly any frogs. So it is true, you know, if you want to see the Amazon rainforest, you had better hurry up because it is disappearing right before our eyes. Deforestation is increasing constantly. You know, even the indigenous, you know, breeding more and spreading out more, needing more food, buying less food, shopping less and more. And you might say, well, that's good because they're, you know, self-sufficient again, but it's kind of a mixed bag because they're clearing a lot more jungle, and it's just all very, very complicated. It's very complicated, but yeah, that's one of the big things, you know, like the idea of leaving the jungle, just even to go to town. It's just more and more difficult for me all the time. So thank you guys so much for spending this time with me. I hope that it was helpful to you in some way. Please help me to share my videos. Only 2% of my traffic comes from YouTube suggesting. All the rest of it is from you guys, particularly in Reddit, subreddits. You can really help me out if you share the retreat videos because I cannot... My Facebook is shadow banned, my TikTok, like I have no reach. So I'm totally at the mercy of my community to promote on my behalf. It's meaningless if I try to do it really at this point. So, you know, any sharing that you guys do, I really appreciate it. I actually see it. If you guys share in Reddit and stuff, I have that all is tracked. So I'm watching you. I know what you did last summer, and I know what you're going to do next summer. But I also know if you share my stuff in Reddit or, you know, Discord. Yeah, like I said, I appreciate each and every one of you guys, and I will see you again. I think tomorrow I'm going to eat a big pile of, well, I'm going to drink, you know, 6 or 7 grams of mushroom tea and then come on and play music at night. So see you guys tomorrow. Hopefully it's not so fucking hot and humid because it's rough. It's rough in the jungle right now. And any of you guys that are coming to the retreat, I look forward to meeting you soon. And remember that we have this 2-for-1 right now because somebody bailed on us I let him pay just a little bit to reserve the room, and then he wasn't able to come up with the rest of it. And so rather than keeping the deposit, I said, okay, well, you can just work on it until December, and then don't worry about it. But now I have another room that's empty, and I don't like that very much. So it would be great if we could fill it. So if you guys have friends, you could get it, 50% of what it would cost you to come on your own. If you guys share a room, you're nice big rooms, you won't be cramped. And if you have 2 or 3 people, it comes down even more. So 3 people probably, you could fit 4 people comfortably. There's a bunk bed and 2 singles in each room, I think. So up to 4 people. And if you got up to 4 people, it would cost each of you like nothing almost. I mean, it would be super cheap if you split a room with 4 people. So send me an email if you're into that, and I will see you all soon. Don't forget to hit the like button, share, subscribe, support us on Patreon. Send us billions and billions of dollars to PayPal, Zelle, or Cash App, or else the bunny gets it, and I'm not playing. If you don't want the bunny to get it, then pay the ransom. Good night.